your viewers and other LEPs are probably banging their head against the wall saying, everyone tells me I can be an LLC, but I keep hearing some people say you can't. I can't find the right answer. I couldn't find the right answer. It took me like 3 hours of research to find the right answer. And I'm giving it to you guys, hopefully in a distilled manner in like 10 minutes that makes sense. But the short answer is no. LEPs cannot operate as LLCs in the state of California. They must form what is known as a professional corporation.
Welcome to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast, a podcast to empower, inspire, and collaborate with aspiring and practicing licensed educational psychologists and like-minded professionals. We're your hosts, Jana Parker and Bethany Zoller, bringing professionals together to talk business, private practice, and find inspiration from our community.
Thank you for joining us. Welcome, everybody, to the Empower LEP Collaborative Podcast. We are your hosts, Jana Parker
and Bethany Zoller.
And today we have with us a tax attorney, Mr. Justin Alt. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We are really excited because this is the first time that we are having somebody join us who is not an LEP. And we want to open this platform up to people who can help us with our businesses because, Justin, as you know from personal experience, LEPs know next to nothing about business typically. So we found Justin because he is the husband of a said LEP, and he has helped her establish her business. And we're excited to have you here to talk to us about establishing a business entity and what that means for us in California. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Justin.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to talk about this stuff. Just kind of off the bat, I should let you know, this is not my area of expertise. I'm a federal tax planning lawyer. I do business succession planning, but that's kind of related to, but not necessarily on point for forming a business and specifically what type of business certain people can form in California. So I actually don't know this from my professional life. I learned it when I was advising my wife, Meredith, because she just recently became an LEP. She passed the exam and has her license from the state. And she was asking me, what kind of business can I form? And I was like, I don't know. So I had to learn the statutory scheme, and it is maddeningly complex in California. All of the statutes that relate to one another, it's nearly impossible to find the correct answer. And I'm an attorney who's trained in reading statutes and in finding this kind of information. And it is very, very difficult. So I'm not surprised that you get a lot of questions from your viewers and from other LEPs in the state regarding, hey, what kind of business can I form? Right. The answer is pretty straightforward, but it's hard to find the right answer. And once you have the right answer, it's really ridiculously easy to actually go ahead and create the correct business. But once you do, it's going to change the way that you operate in terms of your taxes, in terms of ongoing filing requirements with the state. So it's really imperative that you have a qualified representative like a CPA to help you on a going forward basis, not necessarily getting it off the ground and running, but somebody to do your taxes and know what filings you have to make with the state every year.
Yeah, this question has been going around several Facebook groups, and we have been trying to find some answers. And I know people who have all three kinds of business entities, sole prop and LLC and S Corp. And there have been lots of questions about like, well, can I have an LLC? And so this is really perfect timing for you to come in and give us some guidance, because I think it will help a lot of people and stop us from spinning our wheels and allow us to move forward.
Yeah. So when my wife first asked me, what kind of business can I create? My first instinct was LLC. Everybody loves an LLC. They're the new kid on the block. They're the cool kid. They're kind of like a corporation, kind of like a partnership. There's more flexibility. You might have to be a PLLC, which is a professional limited liability company. But then I learned that's not the right answer. You cannot be an LLC in California as a licensed professional. And that's under California Corporate Code Section 17375. And that's part of the LLC Act. There's a similar provision in the law regarding limited liability partnerships. Nobody wants to be those anymore now that LLCs are around. But in case somebody did want to form an LLP, they can't do that either. So that act specifically says an LLC cannot engage in professional services as defined in other parts of California law. Super helpful. Okay, so now we have to turn to the other parts of California law, which are referenced, which defines professional services. Under old law, and this is a source of a lot of the ambiguity, it wasn't expressly defined. There was an opinion from the state attorney general that distinguished between people who need a license for things that require an advanced degree or a lot of professional experience and higher education training on the one hand. Those are the kinds of people who can't engage in professional LLCs. That's a professional service. So they listed examples like doctors and lawyers, accountants, psychiatrists. Not super helpful because it concluded with, this has to be a case-by-case analysis. And they distinguish that from things like hairdressers, which also require a license, but not really the kind of thing that you have to go to graduate school for, right? Mm-hmm. So that was somewhat helpful guidance, but it left some questions. And so the legislature enacted a response to that, and they did list out what it means to be engaged in professional services within the scope of this. You cannot be an LLC law. And so it lists, if you are licensed under 3 specific California acts, and that is the Business and Professions Code, or the BPC, the Chiropractic Act, and the Osteopathic Act. And so, you're looking at this, you're like, okay, I'm a licensed educational psychologist. I'm probably going to be able to eliminate the chiropractic and osteopathic acts right off the bat. So I'm going to go to the Business Professions Act, the BPC. And my God, that thing has like 17 different chapters. Each of them have like 47 different sections. It's not until you get down to section 13.5, or chapter 13.5, which is in the 4,900 sections of the act. So that gives you some sense in where this is in terms of how many code provisions there are. You get to a section that is called the Educational Psychologist Practice Act.
Whoa.
And it requires a license issued by the Board of Behavioral Sciences, or the BBS, and it defines the practice of educational psychology. It contains all of the rules that you have to follow, what the scope of your professional practice is, and who is overseeing it. And so, yes, you are licensed. You are a license holder that is within the scope of those 3 acts that is required from operating as an LLC. That is a very mangled statutory structure, but that's what we are working with. And that's why your viewers and other LEPs are probably banging their head against the wall saying, everyone tells me I can be an LLC, but I keep hearing some people say you can't. I can't find the right answer. I couldn't find the right answer. It took me like 3 hours of research to find the right answer. And I'm giving it to you guys, hopefully in a distilled manner in like 10 minutes that makes sense. But the short answer is no. LEPs cannot operate as LLCs in the state of California. They must form what is known as a professional corporation.
Interesting.
Wow.
So can we not be sole proprietors then?
You can be a sole proprietor. A sole proprietor is basically nothing. It's like I'm operating a business and I'm not forming any entity. I'm just my business.
Okay.
And that's fine. And I can talk to you about what the risks are of doing that, why you may prefer to form an entity or why you may prefer not to form an entity.
Yeah. No, that would be great. And it's funny because I've heard this, like Jana mentioned, there's always arguments on, and none of us know what we're talking about, right? We're all like, oh, well, we heard from so the only argument I'd ever heard for why LLC was okay was that they looked at it as it was a clinical thing. But I had no idea that who actually knew we existed. Somebody wrote this down because normally no one knows what an LEP is.
Right. I feel honored that we're in the legal statutes.
I know.
It's a very lengthy section. It's got different chapters and different provisions. Like it's very well defined. Somebody thought this out, what your practice was, what you should be allowed to do, what you shouldn't be allowed to do, who can do what you do, and who oversees what you do. This is a very comprehensive state law. But yeah, you are in there, and you will see if you Google it, like, can psychologists be form an LLC? You'll see answers and they'll say no. And as you know, clinical psychology is very, very different. There's a different board that licenses clinical psychologists, and you will see people opining in somewhat official sounding capacities that, well, because you are not a clinical psychologist and you're overseen by the Board of Behavioral Sciences instead of a medical board, or whatever body oversees clinical psychologists, that you're not within that sphere. but that's actually incorrect. You are authorized under the BPC to practice. You have to get a license as required, and you are
I feel
therefore
like we're pretty
scope.
efficient now.
We are.
But I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
I know.
So,
I have some questions, but so I want to know, I want Justin to go into what you just asked, Bethany, but before we get off of this, I want to know two things. Number one, why wouldn't we be able to have an LLC? Like, is there like a reason behind it? And second, three things. How do people just get one, even though it's not allowed? And then what do they do if they have one and it's not legal?
Yeah, so those are great questions. So one is the policy reason why, and it's because a professional service corporation cannot insulate the owners, the professional, from personal liability relating to the discharge of their professional responsibility. So think of it like a doctor. The doctor forms an LLC and he's out there, or he or she's out there negligently performing surgeries that he or she is not qualified to perform. The LLC has no assets. The LLC's worth is based on the doctor's skill. The LLC might have, some medical equipment, some things that it could liquidate, but it's really kind of broke and poor and bankrupt. If you let doctors form LLCs and shield themselves, because they're paying themselves the salary or they're bailing out all the income, those are in personal bank accounts. If they're shielded from liability for professional malpractice in virtue of owning an LLC and conducting their business out of an LLC, you can very easily insulate yourself from any liability for malpractice. Like lawyers could do that too, accountants could do that, psychiatrists, psychologists, anyone could do that. And that's why I'm sure you and all of your viewers maintain separate professional liability insurance policies. And that's what shields you from personally being on the hook to cover any damages from a lawsuit in which you're sued. But if we didn't have this provision in state law, it would be very easy for a clever attorney to come up with an LLC agreement that shields you and all your assets from any exposure for transacting your business. So that leads into another question. What are you protected from? Because you do get some limited liability from a professional corporation. So anything that somebody could sue you for that doesn't relate to providing therapy and your profession, things that are not going to be covered by your professional malpractice policy, they couldn't sue you and come after your assets personally for those things. So it could be like a breach of contract with a landlord. It could be, any number of things in which a person might sue you that don't relate to the discharge of your professional duties. So you are covered from liability. They can't sue your business and come after your assets unless there are some legal ways that they can do it. But generally speaking, you can't do that. So that's why you would prefer to have a corporation to a sole prop. But it also kind of explains the public policy of why did the state care and restrict who can be an LLC? And that's what they had in mind is people shouldn't be able to easily insulate themselves from the exposure from committing professional malpractice in a way that would leave their tort victims unable to redress their injuries and recover any damages. Sorry, I rambled on for a long time and now I've forgotten the other two questions. One was, what do you do if I remembered them. Why does the state let people do this? Well, there's like literally no oversight in the formation process. You go to the Secretary of State's website and you tell them what kind of business you want to form. You tell them it's an LLC. You file the articles of, whatever the articles of incorporation or whatever it is for an LLC. I'm drawing a blank. But the state isn't making any determination at that point that you are engaged in a legal practice for an LLC. The state has oversight, but it's not at that stage. And they may never catch you. They may never, find out. How could they find out? Well, you could get a tax audit from the state. Somebody could sue you and you would assert liability and they would say, actually, you are engaged in an illegal act for an LLC. You are not allowed to do this and you're not covered professionally. And that's one issue. That's one way in which you can, what they call pierce the corporate veil, is having engaged in ultra vires actions, which are actions that are not authorized under the type of entity that you form. So an LLC that's going out there and providing educational LEP services to clients would be engaged in what's called ultra vires actions. And anyone who sued you could pierce the corporate veil and come after your personal assets. Now, they probably wouldn't, because everybody has professional liability insurance coverage. But to the extent that they wanted to, they could, because you're operating a business that is not allowed to be operated out of an LLC. So you have no liability protection basically for anything, because it would cover your breaches of contract and all of the things that you want the entity wrapper around you to insulate yourself from. All of those things, all of the reasons why you would prefer a professional corporation to a sole prop would evaporate if you're running it out of an LLC, because it's transacting an illegal business, and it's disregarding the rules and structures in place for forming and operating a business, so that the courts basically treat it as if it doesn't exist for all purposes.
I feel that is so interesting. And one of the things that I think is like, I don't know who talks to who, but you get professional liability insurance. And when wouldn't they say, well, what kind of business entity do you have? And why would a malpractice insurance company cover you if you have the wrong kind of business entity?
Well, because they're covering you personally, and they may know that you are operating out of a business, but their policy is going to pay out whether you formed the wrong kind of entity or not. Like, they're covering you as a professional for your services that you're providing. So if somebody sues you for providing, negligent, I don't know what basis they would have, but a lawsuit against you for your professional malpractice, your insurance policy would cover those damages to the extent that you have coverage. And they may not know, because these are national companies, right? These are companies that insure people in every state, and they're not going to know what state law is in California and what kinds of people can operate what kinds of businesses. So the odds are you're dealing with somebody who is a professional, but they're a professional in terms of what insurance coverage is and what kinds of acts they cover. They're not going to know the niceties of any state's laws regarding what type of business people can run.
Okay. Because I was thinking when I switched from being a sole proprietor to a corporation and hired people, like hired employees, now my malpractice covers them too. So I thought that they were more concerned about it, but I guess not. Like, I guess not in this sense.
Yeah.
Like, I did have to do something different, but
give them more money. That's what you had to do.
I did.
Yeah.
Give
them more money.
You had to basically say, I'm running a business, and all of these professionals work for me, and they all are professionals who are now covered by your insurance. Whether or not that's an illegal business that was formed for I don't want to say illegal, because that has like connotations. I see you laughing, Bethany. I mean, like, you're going to jail. But like formed for an ultra virus purpose of professional services, whether that's true or not, you still have a contract with your insurance company to provide malpractice coverage for all of the professionals who are listed on your policy. So if you are in an LLC and you do have employees and your insurance provider has issued a policy that covers all of those professionals, you're still going to be covered. They're going to have to pay out because they don't really have a dog in the fight of what kind of entity you form. They're your insurer. They're insuring you as a professional.
All right. So Justin, first off, I should say I am not running an illegal business. I have an S corp.
I meant like global you, not you personally.
No, I just felt like I need to preface that. But I do know LEPs that have LLCs currently. So what should we be telling them when they contact me and Jana and they go, oh my goodness, I'm running the wrong type of a business. What would the steps, or who should we point them to?
Report them to the FBI and tell them to cart them away, and they'll go to jail.
I'll get that number.
No. Yeah. No, it's actually really pretty painless. So, one of the risks is if you're running an LLC and you think you're an LLC and you've got more than one person in your business, you're actually a default like at-law partnership, which it may not affect you, but it may affect your taxes. I wouldn't really go into that with anyone and say, oh, you got to look at your taxes and maybe amend your returns, because if whatever. What I would say is dissolve your LLC, form a professional corporation, if you have assets in it, like assign any leases that you have to your LLC, talk to your landlord and say, you know, I'm getting out of this LLC and I'm forming a new business. It's going to be a corporation, a professional corporation, and just basically start over. You know, this is not a business that has a significant amount of assets building up in it, like a real estate company. So you don't really have to worry about like, can I do a tax-free reorganization? Am I going to have to book gain on, you know, any dissolution or formation of a new business? I would just say scrap it and start over is probably the easiest answer for most people. Just dissolve your LLC and form a professional corporation.
Now, how do we decide, I guess, what are the benefits of a corporation versus a sole proprietor? I know when I started, I started with sole prop, honestly, because it was cheap. That was how I did it.
Yeah,
I know it wasn't. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, go, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, that was purely my logic behind it was finances. So I'm sure that there's a better way to be looking at it. So why would I go S Corp, especially starting out versus a sole proprietor?
And is S Corp the same as professional corporation? You keep saying professional corporation, and I'm like, wait, I have an S Corp. Is that the same?
Yeah, so I wanted to get into that a little later, but that's a great question. Which one do you want me to answer first? The S Corp distinction?
Go Janice first, so we know what a corporation is.
Okay, so an S Corp, people will often talk about S corporations and regular corporations or C corporations or professional corporations as if there's a distinction between like an S corporation is one kind of entity and then there are these other kinds of corporations. That's not true. S corporations refer to a tax election made by the corporation. And any corporation, a professional corporation or general corporation formed under state law can make an S corporation election by filing a tax form with the federal government and saying, I want to be an S corporation. Now, there are requirements. You can't have like more than 100 shareholders. You can't have more than one class of stock. You can't have any foreign people owning it. You know, only certain trusts can be shareholders. But assuming that most of the people listening here are going to meet the requirements for an S corporation, there's going to be a handful of shareholders at most. Nobody is, you know, going to be, you know, trying to sell shares of their S corporation stock to foreign individuals or putting them into like irrevocable gift trusts and blowing up the deal. S status just refers to a tax treatment. You are electing to be taxed under subchapter S of the Internal Revenue Code rather than subchapter C of the Internal Revenue Code. And every single one of you who forms a professional corporation should elect S status. C status is terrible and should only be used if you are trying to take your company public and, you know, be listed on a stock exchange. Then you have to be a C corporation, but nobody else, unless you have to be, should be a C corporation. That's, you get hit with double taxation.
So professional corporation is just the umbrella category for any of those.
It's the kind of entity that can make an election to be taxed as an S corporation. And people often will talk about S corporations as if they're a separate category of entities. They're not. It's just corporations, and the corporation can be taxed as either an S corporation or a C corporation.
All right. Okay. So now my question, why corporation? Why professional corporation? I'm going to use the right terminology.
Yeah.
Why should we form a professional corporation rather than a sole proprietorship?
So this is an exercise that I did with my wife just a few nights ago, you know, when she was wrestling with the decision. And you're right. A sole prop is cheaper. It's easier. It requires way less work. Like you don't have to do an annual filing with the state. You don't have to pay the $800 a year franchise tax board tax in addition to your state income tax. So it is definitely easier and cheaper. You are not protected from any acts that you engage in while operating your business. So you have no liability protection. You also are at some point hopefully going to grow your business. Like Meredith was talking about, well, like I'm just building my practice now. I don't have a lot of revenue, and you know, who knows when it's going to pick up. You know, but I said to her, at some point it is going to pick up, and your business needs are going to be more complicated, and you're going to want to have a structure in place that works from day one going all the way to the end of your business. You don't want to have to start as a sole prop, And then you have, contracts entered into with yourself doing business as whatever the name of your business is, bank accounts under DBAs, leases under DBAs. You're going to be working with like HIPAA, contractors and billing specialists and insurance companies. You've got to change all of that over once you form a business. And so for us, it didn't, even though it's more expensive to start, it made sense that in the long run, because she does want to be doing this as her career long term, she should have a corporation. She's going to need it eventually, even if that day isn't today. The day that she formed it was actually several days ago. Maybe it was last week. They all kind of run together. But so that's what I would say. It's a personal decision. I would think for most people, they're going to want to have some sort of formal business entity. And while it is more expensive up front, you actually do have a play that you can make to lower your taxes as an S corporation that is not available to LLCs, unless they elect to be taxed as S corporations, which they're allowed to do. But S corporations are not subject to self-employment tax. So you can hire yourself as an employee, pay yourself a reasonable salary. The reasonable salary is subject to the 15.3% self-employment tax. But all of the excess earnings in the S corporation that you can distribute to yourself tax-free. It's not taxed as dividends. These are tax-free distributions from your business. They're subject to income tax. You're taxed on the whole thing, but you escape that 15.3% self-employment tax on the piece that you can carve out that isn't your salary. So people always ask, like, what is a reasonable salary? Well, if you're generating $700,000 a year of taxable income and you pay yourself $50,000 a year as a salary, that's probably not a reasonable salary. If you say, well, a general professional relationship would be if I hired somebody, I would keep as the business owner 2/3. A third of that goes to the overhead, a third of that goes into like kind of the general business profits, and a third of that is their salary. If you're playing within that rule book, you're probably in bounds of reasonableness. But the IRS does look at this. They do, and especially if there's a massive discrepancy between the amount of business income, taxable income the S corporation earns, and the amount that's reported as a salary to the business owner. That is something that they look at. So I would encourage people to not play games with it. Pay yourself a reasonable salary. That reasonable salary will avoid 15.3% of your taxes. And it does become more tax efficient to run an S corp than a sole prop.
Yeah, and your CPA or accountant can help you figure out what your reasonable salary is. That's right. That's like how I.
Yeah, you would want to talk to a professional, but I think, Jana, you would probably have a sense of like, if I were to hire somebody to work in my practice, what would I pay them? Would it be based on a percentage of the revenue that they bring in? Would it just be a flat salary? Mm-hmm. Who's taking, like, because you as a business owner, you're taking on all the risk. And so you do get to, you are a separate entity from yourself as an employee, and that is very clear in the law. So you do get to still have that same kind of discussion with yourself as the employee, like, hey, I'm the S corporation, I'm your employer, I have all the risk. You're my employee self. You have none of the risk, so I'm paying you a salary. It's kind of hokey, but it is true. Yeah. And so you can save some money, but you're right. Talk to your professionals about, what is a reasonable salary. You don't want to play games with this because you can get hit with a tax penalty for underpayment.
Mm-hmm. I love how, I love how you said you don't want to have to switch partway through, because I think Bethany and I both did that. We both started as sole proprietor, and then we both switched to S corp. And one of the things that I tell people is I really wish I had just started as an S corp, but I didn't know what I didn't know when I didn't know it. But yeah, my goal was to grow. Now, there are some people who have their LEPs who are like, I am never going to leave the schools. I just want to do some contracting work, or I want to just do a little bit of a side gig or something like that. So if you're a W-2 employee doing a side gig, you don't even have to form a business entity. But if you want to do some contract work, that might be a different story. And if is there like a time when you'd go, well, I want to do some contract work, but I'm going to, be just a sole proprietor? Or, should everybody, like if someone doesn't have any sense that their side business is going to grow, but they want to be a 1099 person rather than being a W-2 person. Is there any, I mean, is that still a person who should form an S corp? Or
probably not. If it's just like a side hustle, yeah. Thank you for correcting yourself. That it's a professional corporation form, and then you make the S election. That is a pet peeve of mine. So thank you for that.
Welcome.
I appreciate it. I would say like the side hustle folks, the people who are like, I might want to like pick up some work from like a telehealth company and, you know, contract within the schools, but I'll be like a 1099 independent contractor. Like Meredith did that before she was licensed as an LEP. She didn't have the school district because she, you know, pretty much just been doing that since we moved to California from Seattle. That's, you know, not relevant. But she was operating as a sole prop like for the last like 3 years. And I said, hey, you know, we talked about whether she wanted to be an S corp, and I said, you know, it doesn't make sense to do it right now because you're just paid on a 1099. This is basically like wage income. You've got your insurance coverage. You know, anyone who looks to sue you is going to look first to the deep pockets, which is the school district. And you are not going to be held personally responsible for anything that a parent sues you for. And realistically, what are parents suing schools over for? Like, you know, school psychology service. They want their kids to qualify or they don't, and they're disagreeing with the IEP and the placement. And so that's not money damages. And that's stuff that the school district fights because the school district has a dog in the fight. And like, you're not even going to be a party to any lawsuits, really, if all you're doing is contracting for schools.
Good point. Yeah, that's how I started out for myself. I started out and it was such a side hustle. Like I was having kids and working a couple of days a week. So I stayed sole proprietor until my CPA basically told me I was throwing away money because I was getting that, what was it, 15% tax on top of it? Yeah. And he was just like, but for me, it was like, I needed to be pretty well established for it to be financially advantageous. So that's really good information because I know a lot of people that we talk to are just starting out. And so I don't want to point them in the wrong direction. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, certainly not everyone needs to form a business entity. If this is just a side hustle, or you're just like doing this to contract with school districts on the side, or even you have a few private clients like over the summer break or during breaks, or just, you know, to fill in, you know, I don't know, parts of your day, maybe you only work part-time for the schools. If this is just a side gig, I would say just be a sole prop. Unless you do want to expand your business. And then, as you know, it is a headache to transition everything over from your DBA to your S Corp or your professional corporation that is elected to be taxed as an S Corp.
Yeah. I also love how you said, you know, if you hire people, you know, those kind of like 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, you know, just breaking it up like that, because like I have group practice and I worked for group practice before. So I've been on both ends of it, right? I've been on the end where I'm the employee going like, well, why are you taking so much of my paycheck? Like, why am I giving you so much of, you know, what the cost of my service is? And now being on the employer side, I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, you have no idea how many things I have to pay for with this overhead, you know? So yeah, you can't, you know, so I think there are pros and cons to both, you know, but some people are going to want to do their own thing. Some people never want to do their own thing, you know, so, but I like how you mentioned that.
Yeah. You have all the risk and all the overhead, like 2/3 is reasonable. Like,
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. I like that too.
Well, Justin, I know our time is coming to an end because you've got another meeting to come to. Is there anything else, any other tidbits of information that you feel like licensed educational psychologists should know?
You know, I think I covered a lot, and I'm sorry, I threw a lot of technical stuff out here, but I think like the closing line would be like, if you have an LLC, you're not like in dire straits, you just need to do something to correct it. You might or might not need a business planning attorney to guide you through this, but I hopefully provided enough information that you know what you need to form and how to do it. You just go to the Secretary of State's website and you answer a few questions, and it's pretty easy. But I would say work with a very good CPA, and I can, you know, get you both a list that you can provide for people if you don't already have referral sources for, going forward. How do I operate this thing? What do I need to file with the state? What are my taxes going to look like?
That's amazing.
Well, Justin, thank you. I mean, I think it's so relevant. We have so many people asking these questions, and we love kind of like the details like that. Like, thank you for sharing a little bit of, like where you actually found that, because it helped.
I Googled it while we were talking because I have to read
data.
now.
We're like, give us something like for real that we can say like, this is what, and you did that. You didn't just say, well, I'm an attorney, so I know. No, you gave us exactly what we needed. So thank you. And I hope that this has helped people feel like they have some more understanding of what they need to do and why, and nobody's going to jail. And
well, that we know about, right?
That we know about.
We can't certify that for certain that they're not going to. But thank you both for having me. I really appreciated talking to you, and I know my wife has appreciated all your guidance and forming her business and becoming an LEP. So thank you, Jana.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. And for our audience, we hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time on the Empower LEP Collaborative podcast. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP Collaborative podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlepcollaborative.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, or if you have any questions for us, don't hesitate to connect. We would love to learn more. Jana can be found at jana@empowerlep.com, and Bethany can be reached at bethany@lepcollaborative.com.